Okay, so we're talking about the Addie model, and some of y'all have heard of it. Well, one of you have heard of it. So the rest of us, there'll be new things. What do I hit? Ah, there we go. Okay, so it's based on 5 steps or processes: analysis, design, development, implementation, easy for me to say, and evaluation. Of these, which do y'all think would be most important, or which of these you think you spend most time working on if you're trying to do a class? 4, implementation? Who agrees with that? Who says analysis? Who says design? Okay. Who says development? Who says evaluation? Okay. You'd all be right. It could be argued, but most instructional designers say the design is where you spend most of your time. And so we'll spend more of our time today talking about the design of. You get a prize. Gold star. Gold star. And there's a lot of overlap in these steps, so they're not just, this is all you do here. You know, everyone changes a little bit, and you kind of take it to the next level, and it fades. And the evaluation phase circles back and forth all the way through it over again. Okay. So during the analysis, before you look at it, what do you think you analyze if you're going to get ready to teach a class? Let's pretend you're getting ready to start a brand new course you've never taught before. What would you want to analyze?
The recipients.
Right, the learners in the class, or whoever's receiving it. What else?
Their needs are.
What their needs? Good.
Their needs assessment.
Needs assessment of the learners, or okay, what else can you think of that you want to analyze?
How much they already know.
Right, what they already know. What else? Besides the learners, what are some other things you want to think about?
What you're teaching.
What you're teaching? Yeah. We had SACs last year. What else can you think of? Come on. Student learning outcomes, the objectives. Objectives are the toughies. Okay, so there's a few other things, but that's a lot of them. So the learning problem, the goals or objectives, the audience's needs, existing knowledge. Y'all got most of these right. There are a few other things. You also want to think about your learning environment, where you're going to be teaching the course, and your constraints. How long do you have? Are you doing a full semester class? Are you doing the first 9 weeks, second 9 weeks? Are you doing it during the summer? And any other constraints or options. If you want to do it online, hybrid, web enhanced, all those things you want to analyze and think about before you ever do anything else. So to simplify it, you want to think about your goals, your materials, the learner's current capabilities, and your SLOs. If you skip this stage, a lot of things can happen. You may have the wrong focus. You may be teaching at a level that's too hard or too easy for your learners. You may have incomplete or redundant. How many of y'all have had students that you've heard, maybe they talk to you, or maybe just overheard them talking amongst each other, and they are frustrated because their teacher, for whatever class they're taking, is either talking about the same thing over and over again, or they're talking about things during the class that's not on the test. They are, they are skipping information. We get this test and it was never even mentioned during the course, and all of a sudden we're being graded on it. Those things frustrate students. They really become very upset about those kind of things. So you want to make sure you know what they need to know, and we address it during the class. So that's some of the things. Pretty fast. Now we're already to design. We're going to be in design for a while. We'll spend a little bit of time here. So during the design, you're going to be thinking about, before we ever develop anything, before you develop any web-based learning, before you develop anything, what do I want to teach, and how am I going to do this? And we should be thinking about the overall design of it. So when you look at your design, you want to move your learners from what they know already to what you want them to know. How can you do that? What's the smooth way you can do that? And your design's going to vary depending on if you're doing face-to-face, or if you are, doing online. If you're giving them a handout, whatever you're doing. Some other things over here on the right side. If you are doing any kind of visual aids or any graphic designs or any storyboards, that will be done in this stage. That's when you do it. So here are your questions. How should your content be organized? What ideas should be presented? What's your delivery format? We're going to talk about each one of these in a few minutes and kind of get it down to more. Activities and exercises that you'll use to help the learners learn. And how are you going to measure their accomplishments? Can y'all think of any other design questions? Things you might want to think about while you're designing your course? Is that everything in the whole world? Can you think of anything? I mean, y'all had to think you came today, did you? You had to think about stuff. Well, let's see. Here it is simplified. I took all those other things we've been saying the last 2 slides and I put it into 3 little groups. How will the course material be grouped and sequenced? I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. And then what instructional methods and tactics will be used to present the material, and what assessments will be used to measure the success of the learners. So grouping and sequencing. How do you usually sequence your classes? Do you go by the chapters in the book, or do you sometimes vary from that? How do you vary?
I move them around based on the content that I feel flows from one chapter to the next.
Yeah, I do that too.
And there's only like one set of 3 chapters that I do in chronological order.
Are y'all the same way, everybody else, or do you kind of stay with your book? I know for mine, some of the textbooks, they jump around so much, and to me, if I were to present it in the way that the textbook has it, I don't think they would get it. You know, it just doesn't make sense the way some of it's presented, so I group it differently.
I think that's really dependent on the course, the subject matter. In math, computer science, I mean, that chapter builds on the previous chapter you got to.
Yeah.
You can't skip.
Yeah, and that's the difference between probably an analytical subject and one that's a little more fluffy. Fluffy, like mine. I teach a fluffy subject too. Once the topics have been grouped, you'll need to organize it into a course structure. So how is it going to go throughout the whole thing? And then as you go through the course structure, you also look back again at each of the groupings and see how you're going to do that. And that determines your course. There's your design for the course. So how do you do that? Sequencing options. Step by step is how you do yours. And I would think math course, that would be perfect. You know, it's like making a cake. Here's the directions. You got to follow them step by step. And if you vary, you're going to end up with a big flop. You're not going to end up with a cake. So you got to follow the steps to have success. Part to whole. I think of that as thinking of, here are the trees, now here's the forest, you know, taking the details and then showing the big picture. Or you can start whole to part. Here's the forest, now let's look at each of the trees. Okay, can you think of how you can apply that to your topic, how you would do that? Known to unknown. A pre-test maybe, what do you know about this? Or do you remember in high school when you learned this? And then, what do we know? I use this with how the heart pumps blood into the body. Everybody knows, you know, the heart picks up the oxygenated blood and takes it to the body. So that's what everybody in the class knows. Now let's break it down. How does that really happen? Here is, you know, we're going to the unknown and how it happens. What's going on there. General to specific. Again, looking at the big picture, then taking it to details. Can you think of other sequencing options that I hadn't talked about? Like with art, is there another way you can think of you would do it?
To have it and solve, and you have to find a problem before you can solve it. So there's an exploration process to begin with to make a problem, and then you have to work to solve that problem.
I guess that would be sort of under the known to unknown. What do we not know? How can we solve it? I don't know, maybe.
Or unknown
to known.
To known.
Yeah,
that
would be right. Yeah, that would be unknown to known. Yeah, so you create another category that the experts haven't thought of. We have a genius. Okay, methods and tactics. Okay, your strategy, so to speak. How are you going to present this? Are you going to do group discussions, modeling, have somebody come in and talk to the class that's a peer maybe? Scenarios, imagine this is happening to you. How would you respond? Maybe in sociology you might do that sometimes. Psychology.
Other fluffy science. But yes, I do that.
You do that a lot. Okay. Mnemonics, you know, memory. Yeah. Drills, that probably would be more for a science or a math, doing the drills, formulas, working those things. Applied practice, having them do hands-on activities. I love doing hands-on activities because I think that really helps them connect it and learn it more. Are there some other things that y'all do for that? Can you think of anything else? Probably the obvious one that I don't have up there is lecture. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. Can you have another one? That was what you were thinking of? Where's lecture? Okay, so now we're going to the assessments part. You got to design your assessments too, because otherwise you're just teaching and then you don't know if they're actually getting what they need to know. So, and a lot of people say you should design the assessments first and then go back and do all the other part of the design. So there's some controversy in that, but I can see the point of doing that. So in the analysis phase, we were thinking about learning objectives. And now we're going to figure out how, when we did our SLOs for our SACs a few years ago, we had measurable SLOs. They're going to improve by this much. They're going to be able to answer this amount of questions 70% correct or something like that. So we had a measurable thing. How are we going to measure it? Probably the most common way to measure, test. There are other ways you can measure. What are some things you do? A project, fluffy people. Projects, presentations, papers, things like that, or other assessment tools that you're measuring. Even just informal assessments. Do you remember when I asked you this? What did I say? And they answered the question. They got it. So those are just you can do formal and informal assessments. Comment? Sure.
Well,
come on.
Well, what kind of assessment? The student was taking the language and the test was actually verbal because they had to sit one-on-one and conversate. That would be informal.
I think that is more informal, but but unless there are certain criteria, they could check off if they're doing it. Conjugations are correct, pronunciation is correct, used properly in a sentence. Those are things that you can. So it could be kind of formal and informal, as they're doing these things. Basically, your assessment must fit the learning objectives. If they need to speak a foreign language correctly, then just having them write it would not fit, so you have to do it that way. Okay, now we're finally past design and we're in development. We're working on the course, we're putting it together. All that stuff we've been designing, we're going to do something with it. And this has to do more usually with materials. What are the materials you're going to be using? If you followed the pattern so far, this is going to be pretty easy. If you haven't done any design, if you haven't done any of the analysis, you don't know who your learners are, you don't know what your materials are, you don't know what your constraints are, this is hard. But if you've done all of your homework, this is easy. You already have it in your head what you got to do. You've been thinking about it the whole time. Now you're just putting it down. Just there it is. I think it's a really high risk to begin just developing a course unless you do those other things first. Okay.